Welcome and thank you very much for having the opportunity to present this important work at the PIAAC conference. My name is Samo Varsik. I am an analyst at the OECD, and I'm very sorry for not being able to join you in the room. However, Francesca Borgonovi, the co-author of this paper, should arrive in several minutes, and she will be very happy to answer your questions or take your comments. Now, let me present to you the paper we are drafting on skills, personality, and occupational sorting. I'm going to start with motivation and the research questions, then outline the data and in particular the methodology for our work. Then I'm going to present you the preliminary results from the multi-level models, outline some of the next steps that we are planning to do, and then finish with assumptions and limitations. We have two broad sets of motivations for this work. Firstly, do people working in different occupations have different information processing and socio-emotional skills? Now, from the literature, we know that socio-emotional skills profiles of workers from the same occupation is considerably more variable than their cognitive skills profiles. In fact, broad occupational groupings explain around 1/5 of the variance in baseline cognitive performance across individuals. We also know that workers in different occupations have measurably different skill profiles. And this has likely important implications for career guidance. So career counselors may want to consider not only for instance, the academic performance of students when making recommendations, but also their social and emotional skills to provide more targeted and ultimately better advice. The second set of motivations, broadly speaking, stems from the question why two people doing the same job earn different earnings. And of course, this can stem from industry and occupation effects, so some sectors simply pay more than others. It may stem from geography effects, so wages vary by region and the cost of living, and of course it may also vary by worker skills and their credentials and experience and unique abilities. To address these motivations, we outline three research questions. Firstly, how much does overall skill inequality reflect differences between occupations and within occupations? Second, to what extent do earnings disparities lie between and within occupations? And then finally, how do skills, both cognitive and socio-emotional, shape occupation assignment and within occupational disparities in earnings? Now, we believe our contribution is threefold. Firstly, we identify the extent to which occupations differ in terms of skills composition using evidence from 28 participating economies in PIAAC. So far, to the best of our knowledge, large-scale studies have only been conducting using data from specific countries. Secondly, we illustrate the extent to which earning disparities lie between or within occupations. In other words, how much individuals working in different occupations can expect to differ in earnings, and how much individuals working in the same occupation have different earnings. And then finally, we assess how skills, and importantly, both cognitive and socio-emotional, shape occupation assignment and within occupational disparities in earnings. Three mechanisms were identified in the literature that can shape occupational sorting. Firstly, comparative advantage and self-selection means that workers choose occupations they feel match their strengths and preferences the best. Secondarily, task requirements and employer demand means that occupations differ in their core tasks and work contents, which can in turn dictate the skills needed to perform them effectively. In essence, the structure of work creates a demand for particular skill bundles. And then finally, selective retention and socialization means that workers either self-select to exit occupations they feel the tasks of which they cannot perform effectively, or they are terminated, or they choose to train themselves better so that they can perform at those occupations more effectively. Literature from the United States also shows that cognitive and social skills often complement each other, and that employment and wage growth are strongest in occupations requiring both strong cognitive and social and emotional skills. To assess the research questions, which I have shown you on the previous slide, we use the 3 information processing skills, which I'm sure you're familiar with from PIAAC. Additionally, we add delayed gratification, which is the willingness to give up something today to benefit from it in the future. And this is rated by the respondents on a scale between 0 to 10. Considering delayed gratification, we find this quite important because it strengthens self-control, long-term decision-making, enabling individuals to prioritize future benefit over short-term impulses for greater success in health, finances, relationship, personal growth, and others. And then finally, we also add the 5 social and emotional skills that stem from the Big 5 framework in psychology. As I've mentioned, we also assess variance in earnings, which we harmonize to our earnings in US dollar purchasing power parity, and we exclude the extremely high and low percentiles within each economy. We nest respondents into occupations, which we operationalize at the 2-digit ISCO level. And as I will show you later, some models also include covariates, which in our case means gender, age, parental education, immigrant background, number of years of education, whether the respondent is employed part-time in public sector, his or her experience, number of children, self-reported health, and whether he or she are self-employed. We believe that our methodology is quite unique in that we nest respondents within occupations. And so we run 9 separate multi-level regressions, one equation for each of the skills that I have outlined in the previous slides, and we also include country fixed effects. In the second model, we also include the covariates that I have described just before, and the intra-class correlation coefficient illustrates the fraction of the variance in skills that lies between occupation, net of country means, and in the case of model 2, net of the covariates as well. Here are the results from both of these models. So as is expected, the between occupation variance is smaller than within occupation variance. I also want to highlight that cognitive domains show substantial between occupation variance compared to delayed gratification, and the between occupation variance also decreases as we include the covariates, indicated that part of the occupational differences reflect worker characteristics rather than pure job effects. And here is the graphical representation of the interclass correlation coefficient from the models before. So once again, you can see that the ICC is much larger for the 3 cognitive skills compared to delayed gratification, and as we include controls, the ICC decreases. Moving on to social and emotional skills, I would like to highlight that the between occupation variance is highest for open-mindedness and smallest for conscientiousness compared to the other 3. And here is the graphical representation of ICC of all 9 skills, and you can see that the ICC for the cognitive skills is much larger compared to the ICC for delayed gratification or the social and emotional skills. And among social and emotional skills, the ICC for open-mindedness is the largest. To predict earnings, we start with effectively an empty model with just country fixed effects, and once again we nest respondents in the ISCO 2-digit level occupations. In model 2, we include the averages of the 9 skills within occupation, averages of the 9 skills to assess the extent to which between occupation earnings differentials can be explained by occupation average skill endowments. In model 3, we add the covariates, and then finally in model 4, we allow the returns to skills to vary by occupation by adding random slopes for the 9 skills, and this aims to capture the heterogeneity of returns to skill across occupations. Here are the preliminary results from these models. The ICC is the smallest for model 2, which only includes the average skill endowments for each of the 9 skills. Once we include the covariates and center the skills in model 3, the ICC jumps to around 0.15. Now, model 4, given that it is a random slope model, also estimates variances for each of the 9 skills, and here I want to highlight that the highest, there is a high degree of variation in returns to numeracy across different occupations. From among the big 5, there is a high degree of variation in agreeableness, and relatively the lowest degree of variation in conscientiousness. Okay, so where does this lead us to? There is a long line of literature that highlights the returns to specific tasks rather than returns to occupations, and moreover, there is a line of literature that highlights that the labor market increasingly rewards social skills in addition to cognitive skills, or indeed the interactions between those. And so we wanted to add controls for task prevalence in occupations to explain the between occupation variation in returns to skills. Now, initially we thought we would follow the paper by David Deming, who used the ONET 1997 database to estimate routine task prevalence, social task prevalence, and cognitive task prevalence in occupations. But then we thought that maybe we could use our own PIAAC and the PIAAC questionnaire to estimate these, and therefore likely have many fewer missings, which would have likely resulted in connecting the ONET database to PIAAC. And so we thought that we could use the responses to the question, does your current job involve short repetitive tasks of less than 1 minute, to operationalize routine tasks in occupations. And additionally, we thought we could use the item, how often your job usually involves sharing work-related information with co-workers, instructing, training, or teaching people, making speeches or giving presentation, etc., to operationalize social tasks at the occupational level. And we also wanted to use the average of literacy, numeracy, and adaptive problem solving per occupation, but only among individuals who feel their skills are matched to what is required in their job, to assess the cognitive task prevalence within occupations. However, then we realized that there is also this item which you see on the screen, when the respondents, when asked answering the question on whether they feel their skills are matched to the jobs they are having, they were also asked to think which skills in particular they had in mind, and you can see that they could select computer or software skills, they could select skills in operating machinery, they could select foreign language skills, and others, as you can see on the screen. And so we do not have a definite answer on this, but this is indeed where we are seeking some suggestions. So if you have any feedback on how we could operationalize the task prevalence within occupations, in particular the cognitive, social, and routine task prevalence, either using these items or any other items you might be familiar with from the PIAAC questionnaire, we would of course welcome any feedback on that. And we really want to do this so that we can avoid the merging with the ONET database, which we suspect will result in quite a lot of missing observations. Moreover, we are not yet quite sure on whether we need to scale these, so that to scale these items so that they are on the same scale. My initial thought is that probably not, since we are only adding them as controls and then ultimately comparing the variances. But once again, if you have any thoughts on this, we would much appreciate your feedback. Finally, as promised, I'm going to finish with some assumptions and limitations of our work. Firstly, we assume homogeneity of effects across economies. This is operationalized in terms of the fixed effects in the equations. We need to do this so that we have a pooled sample. We cannot run separate economy level regressions because we need large sample sizes within occupation cells. Second, the items that measure social emotional skills or the personality trait, if you will, are quite limited, we believe, and may be prone to measurement error. And then finally, there are unobserved factors which are not at all captured in our work. For instance, technical skills, which might be quite relevant to several of the occupations, which we do include in our regressions. And these are simply not captured in our work. I will finish here. I want to thank you again very much for your attention. I do hope that Francesca is there to answer your questions and take your comments. If not, then please do find her at the conference. She will be very happy to chat to you. And once again, thank you, and I wish you a pleasant rest of the conference.